So if I were to ask GOP strategists how many pickups they think Republicans are going to get in this year's midterms, what do you think they'd say?
I think the Republicans win the House back, win probably north of 30 seats.
I would say somewhere between 30 and 40 is probably right.
And I think we win back the Senate.
This is Kristin Davison, and that's Ken Spain. Both of their jobs pretty simple, to get Republicans elected. Kristin here just helped Governor Glenn Youngkin get elected in Virginia. And Ken's resume includes NRCC spokesman who helped rake in GOP House seats in 2010. Both of these strategists are sure that another red wave is on the way. I'm Eugene Daniels, and this is what you need to know about the midterm elections. Behind every candidate are the folks who do the real work, the strategists. They craft messaging, plant TV ads, and create name recognition. And with 469 congressional seats up for election, Republicans are refining what they think will be the winning recipe to gain control of Congress. A recipe that includes not only A-plus candidates and loads of voter data analysis, but also a dash of Democratic missteps, a little pinch of Trump, and a little luck doesn't hurt either.
Take the strategy, take the messaging, take the data, and make sure that it's being applied in every aspect of the campaign, from the TV ads, sure, and the digital ads, but also who we're talking to on the ground, where the candidate's going. Campaigns that win, they're able to connect that strategy and that day-to-day, minute-to-minute execution of the campaign and do it well. It's the campaigns that somehow disconnect along the way that usually don't make it.
Getting Glenn Youngkin elected in Virginia has given Kristin insight into winning over voters in a state that were all in on Biden in 2020. So what set her strategy in Virginia apart? Youngkin was a first-time politician who walked a fine line with Trump throughout his campaign.
Joe Biden was legitimately elected our president. I mean, he took the oath and was sworn in.
I've said there wasn't material fraud, and I believe that the election was certifiably fair.
The Youngkin campaign, now of course a lot of people ask about it and say, how can we apply that to 2022?
It's the blueprint.
Exactly, it's the blueprint. And the first thing I have to remember is, well, not every state's Virginia, not every candidate is Glenn Youngkin, and it's an off-year race. But we did learn things from that campaign that Republicans can use and apply to their campaigns. One of which is that candidate quality matters.
Flawed candidates cost the GOP the Senate in 2010 and 2012. And Republicans are already having viable candidate troubles there. Herschel Walker in Georgia and Eric Greitens in Missouri, who are both facing allegations of abuse.
The other thing we learned is that data really matters. So we saw in December of 2020, the voters who we can move in the general election, which allowed us to target them earlier and message them earlier. And so campaigns can replicate that now. And most importantly, it was focusing on kitchen table issues, which I think is going to be huge for the midterms this year. We had a Democrat opponent who really stayed in people's living rooms on their TVs and yelled talking points at them, but we sat at their kitchen tables and asked them, what concerns you? Gas prices, grocery prices, cost of living. And that's really what helped propel Governor Youngkin to win.
Republican candidates do have the upper hand right now. Well, because the economy is complicated, and it's an easy move to blame the party in power. Midterm elections, as you know, are normally a referendum on the current president. If you had to pick the top three issues that people running in the House, people running for the Senate this year should be focused on, what are those three issues?
We did data back in December of 2020 and saw the economy was one of the top issues, but we went deeper to see what that meant. Was it taxes? Was it jobs? It was cost of living. And what voters remember, to keep it simple, is that gas was lower when Trump was president, and it's higher now. You're not gonna, if Joe Biden wants to send out pamphlets explaining that it's Russia's fault and it's not his fault, no one's gonna read it because no one's gonna believe it. He has some blame in it, and he's not doing anything to fix it.
Every election always has a demographic or a type of voter that we end up talking about after that election. The Trump voter, the NASCAR voter. I really think 2022 is going to be the election of the angry suburban mom.
Is that a white suburban mom or a black suburban mom? Because they're a little.
I actually kind of think there's a little bit of both. I think, we're starting to see a spike in amongst Hispanic voters as well. But I do think that there are moms in suburbs who are really frustrated that either their child has fell behind and hasn't been able to get the education that they've wanted these last couple of years. I think pandemic, how it plays out, I do think education continues to be an issue. I think crime and I think the issue of immigration are three issues, social issues, however you want to refer to those as, that are going to play predominant roles after the economy.
So if Republican candidates can stay on message, Ken thinks they have a fighting chance.
When you have over 1,000 Republican candidates filed, or candidates on either side, you're going to end up with flawed candidates. Keeping that many candidates on message is not an easy thing to do. If you're relitigating the 2020 election and whether or not there was a legitimate outcome to it, then you are not on message, and you're frankly putting your candidacy at risk.
And of course, each of those not so perfect GOP candidates must make the Trump choice to lean in or not to the endorsement of the also flawed former president.
You know, he is a drag, frankly, on Republicans in a number of competitive seats. At the same time, I also don't think that he's quite as omnipresent. At some point, Republican candidates have to turn the page, especially in the general election, if they're going to position themselves to win.
You need to be able to establish your own brand that will be able to sink or swim no matter who endorses you or doesn't endorse you. And it's back to even in Virginia, Terry McAuliffe shouted, "Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump," every day on TV.
Terry McAuliffe's campaign in Virginia is all about Donald Trump, the boogeyman.
Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, 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 Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Trump, Donald Trump, Trump.
Every day. That's all he did. I was waiting for him to change and hit us on something else. He never really did. And so if you're a Democrat running, whether it's in the most liberal district or state or swing, talk to your voters. See what they actually care about, because right now they don't believe you're listening.
The year 2022, it feels like a lot of the culture aspects do drive, especially Republicans, to the ballot box.
I think where Republicans have been able to find success on the so-called culture war, is on the issue of schools, opening schools, some of the issues around mask mandate. And that's where we saw Glenn Youngkin do well and perform well.
Funny he mentioned Youngkin. Kristin said the same about testy culture wars. So let's get the strategic goods from her on that.
One of the first things we talked about in January 2021, right after we announced, was education. It's always been an issue that Democrats usually own, and we made the decision to immediately grasp it and hold on and go on offense of it. Critical race theory is a politically charged and motivated agenda that, frankly, if you oppose it, it makes one set of children feel bad based on race, which parents don't believe is right.
Let's be clear. Although critical race theory became a culture war issue that appeared to energize voters, it's not actually something taught to kids. What is true is that Youngkin was successfully marketed as the candidate who would give parents a say over what their students learned in school.
We were always pushing education, but when Terry McAuliffe had his debate mistake and said parents basically don't have any business getting involved in their kids' education.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. I'm sure that all of his staff aides went, oh, yeah, when that came out of his mouth.
I think 2 hours after that debate, already online with an attack ad on, because frankly, we thought he would backtrack the next day because it was so dumb.
Virginia parents have a right to make decisions on their children's education. That's the Virginia I grew up in. Terry McAuliffe wants to change that.
And we stayed on TV replaying that over and over and over again. Now, we weren't planning to just run ads and hitting on education. We wanted to get ahead of it. So if something happens in your race that's going to accentuate something, a message you want to get out, or a difference between you and the other candidate, you have to be able to move quickly and in a deliberate way to take advantage of it.
Race, gender, sexual orientation, the list goes on. Democrats and Republicans are very far apart on these issues. Democratic strategists have tailored their message on a perceived moral high ground in the culture war. But Ken thinks Republicans are gaining ground.
If there is a culture war, there's going to be a series of battles, and Republicans are going to win some of those battles, and Democrats are going to win some of those battles over time. Democrats were successful on the culture war in many respects in the 2020 election. I think Republicans probably are on higher ground at this moment, but that's not to say that it can't come back around and won't present issues for us going forward, because I do think Democrats do have an argument to make, particularly on some of the social policies.
Look at Ken giving the Democrats their props where it's due. Let's keep the same energy and see if these Republican strategists can give any free game to their opponents on what they think can be done better.
Now, I get Republicans elected for a living, so I'm not like rushing them to do it. Democrats have had a lease on the suburbs for a while Republicans have bought and paid the mortgage on the rural areas. It is almost impossible for a Democrat to win in a rural area. There are huge chunks of even the bluest states. Now Republicans are starting to get back that lease on the suburbs, again, based on economic and education issues. So my advice is talk about the stuff that people want to talk about in their everyday lives, that they're sitting at their kitchen table and they're not talking about defunding the police. They're talking about the fact that 2 people just got shot at the playground that they went to when they were kids. So there's a disconnect.
There is a huge disconnect. Democrats largely don't want to defund the police. Biden has said this, Nancy Pelosi has said this, but they are struggling with getting that message out there in a major way. Republicans have successfully labeled Dems as the party who is anti-police because of a small contingent in the party.
In my opinion, the president needs to do a better job of taking control of the message and the narrative. I think he's oftentimes one step behind where voters are, and he and his team have been somewhat slow to kind of catch on to the way that the political winds are blowing. I think that part of it is how they've tried to enact some of these policies, with the Build Back Better agenda. They've tried to jam a lot of things into one bill. And so when a bill is about so many things, it almost becomes about nothing. And it's allowed Republicans to define the legislation with relative ease. I think it's also incumbent upon Democrats to figure out how they communicate with voters.